Welcome to the Church Doctors Podcast with Scott and Marla. Thanks for joining us on the Church Doctors Podcast. The Church Doctors Podcast is brought to you by Outpouring or to contact us. Please visit our website at outpouringintl.com.
That's right. And one of the ways that we love people is doing this podcast. Welcome, Marla.
Hi, this is Marla.
Hi. And
throwing me off there, Scott.
And this is Scott, and we're doing part 2 of our missions trip to the Ukraine.
Yeah. So if you didn't hear the first part, go back and listen to it. We're telling the good, bad, and ugly. We're being raw about it, and we're going to tell you the truth and the funny things that happen and the sad things. And when we left last week, or where we left off, we were in a village called Pryluki. And it's on the eastern side of Ukraine, near the borders of Ukraine and Russia. And at this point, we have only done one outreach, and that was to a hospice floor. But we spent 5 actually, if you count the hour to drive to this little town, days driving just to get to our first place. And it was a really physically taxing missions trip. We've been on lots of them, and this was probably the hardest one we've ever done.
Yeah. And so here we are.
But we're ready to go back.
We're in the city of Pryluki, in the eastern part of the Ukraine, northeastern part. It's kind of straight east from the nation's capital and not too far from the Russian border.
Right.
And we're there with Pastor Igor and Svetlana and their daughter, and now we're going back into town to minister to a couple outreaches this church does outreaches like crazy.
Yeah. But first, wait, we had to stop and have lunch, and they wanted to take us and have a real Ukrainian lunch. They wanted to treat us. And remember, we went to that quirky little restaurant that looked like a submarine.
They tried to spoil us, and they were honoring us with this. It was the nicest place in town.
It was so cool. This underground submarine kind of looking restaurant.
The guy that owned the restaurant was a mechanically minded guy, and so his idea for the restaurant was to have each room be a theme. And so the room that we got to be in was like a submarine. He took all control panels and, what are
I don't know, all the little things that you would see on the inside of a submarine. They were there.
I mean, what do you call the things they shoot out of the submarine? They were hanging from the ceiling. The
torpedoes? The
torpedoes that had been, disassembled. And so you could see the insides of the torpedoes, the little engines and the little propeller and all the things. Mm-hmm. It was really, it was fun. The bell, to ring the bell, and
And we got to try real Ukrainian food, which we'd already been eating, but they wanted to make sure that we had the national favorites. And the number one favorite thing I think that Ukrainians love to eat is called sala.
Yeah.
And
they love that.
Oh my goodness.
And so of course they're going to serve it to us because that's their favorite thing. So here we are, we're at lunch, there's salad, there's coffee, there's all the normal things that you would have for lunch.
But we have to have sala.
But here's this sala on the plate. And, we had thankfully looked it up on the internet because we heard about it to find out what it was. And what it is the, when you get thick cut bacon at the store and maybe toward the end of that cut, there might be a strip that doesn't have any meat in it. That's sala. It's just the solid white fat off of the bacon cut of the pig. And they take this uncooked raw piece of fat and they're
pretty good sized piece,
and they like to put it on bread and put
a piece of garlic,
a little bit of garlic, or something,
or an onion.
A little bit of onion on top, and they eat it.
Oh, and they just inhale it. They love it.
And
for us, we're just
and they're looking at us, waiting to see
goodness.
if we like it or not. And so Marla ate some.
I tried it. I ate the whole thing. I did it.
So then, for the rest of the trip, they would laugh every time we would bring up sala because they already knew that
we were not.
We found out later that they already know that Americans don't like it, and I think they were just waiting to see if we were going to be
our reaction would
one of them too. So
I did. I ate it. You didn't.
No, I don't want to eat raw fat.
I did that, but anyway, I did that for the for the cause. But anyway, so we had this fun lunch, and then we were actually running a little bit behind. So we got to the next event, which was another outreach. It was two groups. It was a group of disabled people and a group of blind people. There was over 100 of them. And they had already actually started when we came in. So we really didn't know anything about it other than it was just these two groups.
Yeah. And so I preached an encouraging message to them, and I'm listening to the Spirit of God. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to pray for them? Do you want me to lay hands on them, prophesy? What do they need? And I was really struggling.
But wait, we did something else first. Remember, we started off, wasn't this the place where I hugged everybody first?
Maybe. Probably, yeah.
I don't know.
I can't remember.
I don't know. Anyway, keep going. I think it was the church service.
Yeah, and so I look over at Marla, and I'm like, Marla, what do you, we do this a lot. We partner together in ministry. So I'm like, what are you hearing? What do you think we should do? And she's looking at me like, well, and I'll let her tell the rest.
Yeah, I had kept hearing while he was ministering the name Lubia or Luba, something like that. And now you have to understand, I am really bad at languages. And so for me to keep hearing this, I just knew it was a name, but I couldn't really say it. And I kept hearing, I said, well, have the interpreter ask if there's someone here by the name of Luba or Lubia, and maybe you have a word for them. And so the interpreter asked, and sure enough, one lady in the thing in the room raised her hand and said, "My name is Luba."
Yeah, and so
you had a word for her.
So what this is it's an operation of a word of knowledge put together with prophecy. So she had a word of knowledge of who needed the prophecy, and then the Lord gave me a word to encourage this woman, and laid hands on her and prophesied over her, and tears were coming down their eyes, and they were crying, and so then it happens again.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking, wow, that's cool. Let me lean in and listen some more. Maybe there's another name I'm supposed to hear. Well, I hear the name Richard, and or some kind of a form of that. That's what I could figure out. And so I said it to the interpreter again, and she says, well, that's not a name here in the Ukraine. I said, oh, well, ask someone. I said, I feel like it's a man's name, like Richard. Just ask. So she asks, and it was quiet for a few seconds. And then finally a woman raised her hand, and she said, could it be a surname?
Last name, yeah.
But she said surname, which, I had said it was a man's name, surname. And could it be, and then she said the name, and it was real close to Richard, but I don't remember what it was. And I'm like, yeah, that's the name I heard. And so Scott gave once again.
Turns out it's another woman, and I prophesy over her. Same thing happens. They just get really touched. I'm looking at the pastor, and they're like, wow, this is cool. And
so it happens a third time, and I can't even remember the name.
Turns out to be a man in the back, and I prayed for him.
Yeah.
And so then it was a short outreach service, and so we prayed a blessing over the people. The church again hands out more bags food. And bags of food to bless the people. Come to find out, these two groups used to be government supported, and they lost all their government support, and this church picked them up and is loving them. So there's three things that we know for sure that they're doing in the community, and this is a tiny little church.
Yeah, it's not very
we found
big.
out later they don't have the money to do this. The pastor and his daughter and his wife all work, and they are the ones that are mostly paying for all of this, which was pretty humbling to find out.
Right.
And so,
but come to find out, the first two ladies that you prophesied over were each the leaders of each of those groups.
So through a word of knowledge, God picked out the leaders of these two separate groups, and they needed encouraged because during this wartime, everybody's families have left the city, and then come to find out people that were closer to the Russian border have come to this city. And so people are all mixed up and sent all over the place, displaced. They call them refugees, but they're from their own nation. They just have had to move cities.
Which is very unlike Ukrainians, because they told us that when you get land or build a house, you're there for your entire life. This is not a roving, moving
it's your
around
life's purpose to
community.
Get this property and build a big, nice house that all of your family and extended family can stay in. That's kind of how they do it. So they have relatively large houses, unless they're super old, but we saw some small houses too.
Yeah, but most
for
of
the
them are
most
big.
part,
We're like,
they
wow.
build really big multi-floor houses, and
They just keep building on and on.
yeah,
and on.
and for them to have to leave all that and relocate, it's a big deal.
Yeah. So we ministered to those people, and went back to the hotel, and that was on, I want to say that was Saturday, because the next day was Sunday, and we went to the church. We ministered there. And that's where I'm pretty sure that's where I hugged everybody. We went, so this church service started. You know how, it was very traditional. In fact, every village in Ukraine, as soon as you drive in, the first thing you see is massive Orthodox or Roman Catholic churches. I mean, they're ornate. They're just top of the line. Everything's perfect on them. And then all the homes are like concrete rundown type looking.
And in the Ukraine, these Orthodox or Catholic churches, the outsides of some of them, maybe the Orthodox ones mainly, had gold domes, like 3 gold domes that were shiny gold.
Oh, yeah.
And so you drove through this village.
That's all you can see.
And here's this huge spire building, amazing architecture and craftsmanship, but they focus on the building and not on God, because there's nothing happening in any of those places. They're all pretty much dead religion. But every community, every little tiny, even a postage stamp place where it's just maybe a phone booth and a dog alongside the road. There would be a tiny little, maybe a small version of one, like a shed.
Yeah.
But it would be very ornate, and it would have a gold dome on it. And so that's the spiritual battle that's going on there. Is the older generation that has lived through the Soviet occupation. They've been taught that this is the accepted church, and the church got accepted because of the government said it was.
Right.
And so these people that the churches that we visited, they're Holy Spirit led, on fire people for Jesus. Christians, and with people going to the church, doing church, doing biblical outreach and loving people. It was such a stark contrast, because we went inside some of those Orthodox churches, and it was like, ooh, yeah, it was like it was almost like being inside. To me, it was inside of a really ornate crypt. Yeah, where you would bury somebody, but you wouldn't worship Jesus there, like you would mourn there, right? And that's what it felt like. Yeah, extremely beautiful paintings, craftsmanship, amazing, but not the Spirit of God.
Yeah, and so we went to the Sunday morning service, and it was traditional. Sing the song, do the announcements, that kind of thing, and typically, if Scott's going to be ministering, he'll have me get up and greet the congregation and say whatever I feel on my heart or whatever. And so I was sitting there, and I was like, you have to understand that the people don't have a lot of hope right now. And you can feel that. You can feel the heaviness of the war and the struggle that they're walking through. And I was like, wow, I just feel like I need to change the atmosphere. Otherwise, Scott's going to get up, and it's just going to be another service. And so I got up, and I just said, you know what? My goal here in the Ukraine is to hug as many Ukrainians as I possibly can. And so could everybody just stand up, form a line? Could we turn some fast music on? And I'm going to hug everybody real quick.
You should have seen everybody. At first, they're looking around like, is this okay? Yeah. Are we? And the sound guys, he's like, oh my gosh, I have to do something. And it took everybody so off guard. And yet it was such a loving gesture with Marla standing up there with her arms open, like, okay, go. Like they couldn't, okay, it's on.
Yeah.
All it is a hug. You could see
Right.
them processing all this. And all of a sudden, smiles started erupting on these people who I feel like they're living from minute to minute, not day by day.
Yeah.
Like they're waiting. What's this minute going to be like?
Yeah.
What's this minute? And that's how on edge they are. And when the hugs started getting passed out, joy filled the room. Hope came in. And for at least for them, those moments and the rest of the service, I think, their minds weren't on anything except for God's good.
Yeah.
Like he still loves me. I can still, there's still hope. There's still a future. And for them, that's, again, that's the predominant message that we brought. That we did so many messages, I can't remember exactly what I said there, but one neat testimony from that pastor is back in September, him and his wife prayed and said, God, we really feel a need to have the gifts of the Spirit expressed through our church. Would you please send somebody here to help us with that?
Yeah.
And we're the first ministers that showed up since the war started and since they prayed, and we flow in the gifts of the Spirit. I prophesy words of knowledge. We lay hands on the sick and they recover. And we teach people to hear the voice of God. So, and to do that. And so it was very, if you're living minute by minute, you don't look very far down the road for the future. And yet these two people, pastoring that church, they're looking down the road. They're planning ahead. We need to have a congregation that understands the gifts of the Spirit. And so they ask God for that.
And here we show up.
And here we show up while the war's still going on. And God said yes to them. It was fun.
And it was so neat because they would just ask all kinds of questions about it. How do we do this? And you need to understand too that just like when we lived in Oklahoma and there was tornado warnings on our phone, and there's other kind of warnings that people get on their phone. They had, I don't know what you want to call it, war warnings, and to let the people know, hey, you need to take shelter. You're in a bad spot. You're, whatever. And those warnings are going off on their phones all the time. That's that's like when Scott's saying they're living minute to minute. They don't know when their phone's going to go off. They're not far from the Russian border. And, so that really puts a pressure on them that's extra than that most people don't have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, there's missiles that went off mark and landed clear in Poland and hit a tractor and blew a tractor up during the war. And so these missiles can reach, way beyond where the army's physically at. And so they have to pay attention to what's going on. And yet they still do go to the coffee shop. They still have to go to the grocery store.
Right.
They still,
a lot of people walking their babies
we saw people
in their
getting
strollers.
married.
Yeah.
Brides in their wedding gowns. And two of them,
Life
matter of
has
fact,
to
at the hotel
to
we
go
were
on.
at in one weekend, 2 weddings.
Yeah.
And yet the war's still going on. And so it was kind of fun. We noticed, normally you would go, oh, there's dancing and partying going on and right below us.
Our room at the hotel.
And we're exhausted, and it would be really nice to get a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
And yet Marla and I both were like, wow, it's so refreshing to see them rejoice and just to cut loose and have fun, even though they've got to go back to we know what's next. They still have to deal with it.
Yeah, and so we dealt with it.
Yeah.
We let them. We didn't say anything. Have a party all night long if you want. We don't care. So we did the service. It was amazing. Lots of prophetic word, operating in the gifts, and praying for people. I can't remember if there was salvations at that church or not. We had so many different types of services and salvations and healings and such that I've lost track. But after that, they took us for a beautiful stroll through the village and looking at
saw some of the history of their area.
And they have lots of statues, which of course they've now covered up because
they
sandbag
basement windows and their monuments and things to try to protect them. And
so then the next day we did a service that night with their leaders.
Oh yeah, we did.
They added another service.
Yeah, we asked them
because they said to to learn about the gifts. And that's what we talked about is prophecy. We let them ask any kind of questions they wanted to ask. And so that was a really good night.
They asked a lot of questions about praying with faith.
Yeah.
Praying for your relatives.
How do you pray in this kind of situation?
Yeah. And so it was very good to help equip the saints to do the work of the ministry is what that is. I love that part.
Yeah. So the next morning we got up and now we got to travel back, and we only went 4 hours to Kiev, the capital. And
5 million people live there.
Yeah, and we didn't actually go straight to our room at that point. They actually took us to a place called Bucha. It's a village, and this is a bombed village where we went around and talked to people and brought more humanitarian aid to each one. Rice and flour and oil and oatmeal and foods like that. And the first place that we went to was a little neighborhood where it had been bombed. And the first house that we went to, and I can't remember the lady's name, but she and her husband were at home, and the Russians came in. They took her husband out into the yard and they tortured him and they killed him, left him, bombed their house or destroyed her home. And
she didn't know what was going on because she was down in the root cellar.
Right. She comes up, finds everything destroyed, finds her husband who'd been tortured and killed, and she digs a hole and buries him. And
in her garden.
In her garden. Yeah. And she's living in the ruins, because what do you do when you don't have, what do you do? There's no government assistance.
So all the windows are gone. The walls are so broken that they are condemned. The buildings are going to fall over at some point.
Yeah.
And yet for 5 months or so, they had to live in these
there.
Structures because there wasn't any help yet.
Yeah. And this
was during the winter.
Yeah, this is during winter. And this is a village that surrounds the capital, because that's what the Russians were doing. They were going in and trying to occupy the little villages all around the capital city. And so about 3 weeks after she had buried her husband, I guess the village came up with a plot of land that you were supposed to bury.
A neighboring city or something came up with a morgue.
Yeah. And so she dug her husband up, put him in a wheelbarrow, and pushed him to the drop-off spot.
Yeah.
And she was so bitter, so angry, so she has no hope. Yeah, she had nothing.
You talk about, okay, what do you say?
Yeah. I mean, how do you minister to someone
like that? Here we are, we're living in America, and we complain about not having this or not having that, or our government's making all this decision or that decision, and we have first world problems here. But man, you go over there and you talk to that lady, and you're the one that God sent to stand in front of her, and if that doesn't change your heart and make you cry out to God and go, you're still God. This lady still can hear your voice. She can still be touched by you. What do I say? I mean, you cry out to God inside. And that's what I did. And so she allowed us to pray for her. And I just looked her in the eyes and told her, look, you can still have hope. I don't understand any of the pain that you're going through. I haven't had that. I said, but I tried to connect with her heart. I said, but my wife and I have lost a child, an unborn child, and and we've lost relatives before, so I know what it's like a little bit. And so when I said that, she looked up at me like, oh, like he's not just this American coming to get a photo op.
Yeah.
He really loves me.
Yeah.
Kind of just a little quick glance. And so I prayed for her and encouraged her, and she cried. And
remember, everything we do is through an interpreter too.
Yeah.
So it's
and at
extra
this point,
hard.
she's got a temporary
Poland came in and
house
helped them
to live in, like a FEMA house that we would be familiar with.
But it's right there on her property.
Little small thing with a bathroom and a kitchen.
But still, they don't know how long they get to keep the trailer. They don't have any way to rebuild.
Yeah.
And her neighbors across the street and around her in the same situation. We walked, after we were done with her, we walked across the street to another lady. Her name was Svetlana. And she used to bake bread for everybody in her little neighborhood. So we took extra flour and gave her extra flour so she could keep baking.
Some oil, yeah.
And you walk into her demolished home. It's, the walls have mold on them. She's got poles, log poles holding her ceiling up so that she can be in there. She's alone. And she was just, before we left, she wanted to make sure we had candy. She wanted to give us candy.
She gave us a candy bar. and so it was neat to see the ones who chose to look at life that way seemed a lot happier, that they have something to give and they didn't stop giving. And when we ministered to that group of ladies, it ended up being like 7 or 8 of them came together, and we gave them some bags of food and got to pray for them together in a group. And some of them you could tell have been just sitting, waiting and doing nothing, giving away. But the ones who took the situation and decided, that doesn't change me. I'm going to still bake bread and give it to everybody. And she seemed the happiest of the bunch.
Yeah, but she never smiled. But yeah.
I mean, you could tell it wasn't gloom and doom.
I mean, there were some that just stood there and bawled. They just put their hands in their head, face in their hands, and just bawled.
The old babushkas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. What do you do? If the government's not helping them rebuild, and you're old, and the war's still going on, and where do you get the finances? How do you rebuild? What do you do?
So we just encourage them, have faith in God. Keep looking at Him for your help.
Yeah.
And so we went from there to not too far away, same village, where there was a group of apartment complexes that have been hit very hard. Like one of them demolished and fell all the way down in the middle.
Yeah. You know what? Let's wait and share that next week, because we're at the end of our time and there's so much to share about that one. So join us next week. I think we'll only be on like day 6 or 7 of our 16-day trip.
Continue to pray for the people of Ukraine. They're still suffering. They still don't know the outcome's going to be.
Yeah.
The war's been going on for like 18 months or something, over a year.
No, over a year, just over a year.
And so pray for them.
And if you want to, I'm just to say this, if you want to give financially to help over there, we have connections, and you can go to our website at outpouringintl.com. And you can donate and say, Ukraine, and we will get the money to them 100%.
That's right.
To help them continue to minister on a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week mission that they're on.
Right. So we bless you and encourage you to be someone else's hope today, too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Church Doctors Podcast. For more information or to contact us, please visit our website at outpouringintl.com.